One of the biggest challenges parents face when divorcing a toxic person or a narcissistic person is that what to do about the kids. And different age children face different challenges in this situation. Depends on whether or not you have young children or children who are at elementary age or even high schoolers or adults, depends on what their particular needs. So, I'd like to talk about how to help your children navigate toxic relationships, particularly how to help them maintain a relationship with you while they're also at the same time trying to have some type of a relationship with the other parent. I'm going to break it down by age of children and talk about what their developmental needs are at that stage, and then things to consider and remember when you are helping your kids with this tricky situation. Hi, if you're new to me, I'm Dr. Kerry Kerr McAvoy, a licensed psychologist with over 20 years of counseling experience and a narcissistic abuse survivor. So, if you're divorcing someone who's narcissistic or toxic and you have very young children, the things that they're looking for is they want to know that there's support and stability. They're looking for reliability. The message they want to hear from you is that you're not going anywhere, that your love isn't changing for them just because your connection to the other parent is, because that makes them fearful that if you can fall out of love with the other parent, then they worry maybe you can fall out of love with them. They also want to know that even though that the relationship is going to look different, that doesn't mean that your role to them as mom and dad is going to change. And they may ask questions that they actually don't really want to know the answers to. Be careful to make sure that you don't give more information than really is necessary. Try to listen to what the heart issue rather than what the practical question is. They may ask, like, what happened, but they're actually not looking for the ins and outs of what occurred between you and the other parent. They're really wanting to know, they're wondering whether or not you can suddenly like disrupt the relationship with them, like the relationship they're feeling is being disrupted in the home. So try to hear what the underlying issue is and then address the fear around that to reassure them. And be careful not to weigh in about your feelings about the ex. They don't really want to know what this person has done or not done. They're going to be put in a position of feeling like they might have to choose sides. And if they start to feel like not only is your toxic partner putting them in, putting them in a spot of figuring out who they like better or who they want to be with more, and they feel like it's sort of a tug of war, they're going to start to defend the more fragile parent. Children innately know which relationship is more at risk, and they want both relationships. So if they feel like they might lose the more at risk relationship, they'll often take that side. So work not to put them in that position. If you're dealing with a situation with older teens, their primary issue is looking for acceptance as they work on their identity. The ways you can help them with this is know that their expression of anger or rebellion or even emotional distancing isn't necessarily personal. It just may be the way that they're trying to carve out space for them to be themselves. So see it as not so much as a rejection of you, but rather as just trying to a discovery of themselves. You may find at times that they'll come home from a visit with the toxic ex and then need to tattle on what that ex said about you. Really try not to engage with this. See this, what it was is that it's really not so much about what he or she said, is so much as they're uncomfortable by being put in the middle of this conflict. So address that it must be hard to be put in that spot rather than trying to defend or debate what's real or true. Another thing that's super helpful with older teens is to admit that there were mistakes made on both sides. To know that you're a person who doesn't necessarily see things as black and white can be really helpful because they're trying to sort that through. And sometimes they oversimplify things and they want to make one person the bad guy, another person the good guy. But for you, helping them to realize that things are way more complex and a lot went wrong, but it really didn't go wrong around them can be very, very reassuring. And they also may be unconsciously worried about whether or not that you're not going to accept their uniqueness, that somehow your negative feelings or the difficulty you're having with that toxic parent, they may then project themselves as possibly being also not liked or not chosen. So see some possible of some of their concerns as possible expressions of this ambivalence and this concern about, are they always going to be likable, always going to be lovable, always have a relationship with you? And again, try to find ways to reassure them that whatever happened between you and the ex had nothing to do with how you feel about them. again, be super careful. They may come to you and complain about the other parent, what they're doing, what they think is wrong, and what they don't like. Be really careful not to necessarily jump in and run that other person down, because as much as you may agree that that other parent shouldn't be doing that, by doing that, then you're accidentally picking sides. And then there's that tug of war. And any mistake of getting involved in that tug of war, you're going to end up as a loser, because I'll guarantee you narcissists play that game way better than anybody else. And so it just will go bad and wrong. So resist that. Try not to do that. When you're dealing with adult children, they're in a very different position. And they're looking at gaining your respect and learning how to come into a complex world that involves love and work and relationships. And so they're looking for you to sort of model how you've done that, but also for your respect as they then launch out into their own lives and try to take on the same challenges. So they may talk to you about more adult related issues and the struggles with that, and then it's more permissible for you to be honest a bit more about what may have happened, but be careful again to getting very black and white into the he said and she said. They really probably don't want to know that, and it's going to make them feel uncomfortable. Again, they're still, despite the age that they're at and the fact that they're older, they still always want to know that there's an unconditional love and acceptance coming from you, regardless of what kind of decisions they make. Even if they may make a really difficult decision, like maybe spending a holiday with your toxic ex when you would have preferred that they spend it with you. They're looking for you to be able to understand that complexity and the tough spot that they're in, and that they're trying to navigate it as well as they can. You may even see them try to maintain a relationship at a psychological cost to them with that toxic parent. But again, they need you to hold space for their struggle as they work their way through it. Remember, it took you time to get to the place of you realizing that this person was not a good person to have a relationship with. You had a lot of confusion. You did a lot of placating. You probably gave this person a lot of chances. You're going to see your adult children probably do some of the same as they take time to come to probably the same conclusion that you did. And as tough as that is to see our kids struggle and suffer and long for something that probably will never happen, the best way that we can support them is to allow them to come to their own conclusions instead of rushing them to the conclusions that we've come to. I think the other thing is that there's a lot of loss and grief, and often grief gets expressed as anger. They're looking for you to give them a safe space for their longing to have a better parent than they actually had in this other person. The the losses of maybe the mother or the father figure that they really have needed in their life. The fact that they're addressing a parent who's acts competitive with them, or overwhelms them, or takes on way too much and it treats them like an extension, to the degree that you can be a person that allows them to express those things without necessarily offering your opinion or weighing in on your own grief, really gives them the ability to work that through in a unique way. And it's an incredible gift. It is never easy co-parenting with a narcissist or toxic parent. It is super tricky. I think it costs us as parents a lot, because we have to really hold a unique space for our children that what we may not be used to. And we have our own needs, which means that our kids can't really be a source of that. I mean, we know that at one level, but there's another kind of whole layer to this that adds complexity when you're dealing with a person who's not very healthy. So when we help our kids navigate this is super tricky water, and it requires a lot of maturity, a lot of discipline, and resisting low blows, resisting acting out on our feelings. It just requires a lot from us. But if we know how to navigate this well, we're going to end up having an incredible relationship with our children at each stage of their life. So thank you so much for tuning in on this. If you found this helpful, please subscribe and like and turn on notifications for this channel. And then come back next week for the next topic on managing toxic relationships with difficult people.